The laughter was loud enough to drown out fear. It bounced off the marble walls, mixed with the soft jazz spilling from the speakers, and filled the night with a false kind of peace. La Vostra Cucina was alive, gold chandeliers dripping with light, crystal glasses clinking like promises, and the sweet burn of whiskey coating every word. But beneath all that glamour, something else was breathing, something quiet, something waiting. Amara felt it first, the wrongness in the air. The way the hum of the refrigerator faltered for a split second, the way the cook's hand trembled as he stirred the sauce. She didn't know what it was, not yet, but her skin prickled as if the room itself was trying to whisper a warning. At table 7 sat the man no one dared to look at for too long, Vito Morley. His reputation was older than most of the men laughing around him. He had built an empire out of fear and blood, dressed it up in silk suits and gold watches, and called it business. The way he held his cigar, the way he looked at people like they were coins in his pocket, it all spoke one truth. In this city, Vito was power. And power didn't listen to anyone, especially not to a trembling black waitress who earned her living serving the rich their illusions of control. Amara moved between tables with practiced grace, a tray balanced on her palm, her smile polite but tired. She had learned to make herself invisible here, to move softly, speak little, and never ever meet the boss's eyes. But tonight something wouldn't let her stay silent. Maybe it was the faint metallic click she heard beneath the kitchen floor, or the whisper she caught between two dishwashers, a whisper that said, 10 minutes. Whatever it was, it felt wrong. It felt final. She stepped closer to Vito's table, her breath catching in her throat. "Sir," she began softly, "you shouldn't stay here. Something's not right." For a second the room went still. One of Vito's men, a thick man with a scar slicing across his jaw, narrowed his eyes. The others chuckled, thinking it was some nervous girl trying to flirt. But Vito didn't laugh yet. He looked at her. Really looked. His cigar burned low between his fingers, the smoke curling into her face. "Sweetheart," he said finally, his voice smooth and slow, "the only danger here is your tip if you keep interrupting." The men roared with laughter. Amara's face flushed. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't move. "I mean it," she said, her voice trembling. "Please just step outside, something about to." Vito waved a hand, cutting her off. "Go fetch us another bottle instead, the good one." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to scream, but the weight of every stare pinned her down. She turned away, her hands shaking so hard that the glasses on her tray rattled. In the kitchen, the noise was different, colder. The cooks moved slower, their eyes darting toward the door. Amara's friend Malik, the dishwasher, looked up when she entered. "You told him?" he asked in a whisper. She nodded. And she didn't answer. She didn't need to. His face fell. She moved toward the back door, pressing her ear to the wall. The faint ticking was louder now, deliberate, mechanical, coming from somewhere beneath the floorboards near the wine cellar. Her breath caught. "It's a bomb," she whispered. "It has to be." She ran back into the dining room. The laughter hit her again like heat. She rushed to Vito's table, the fear in her chest breaking through her voice. "Please, you need to leave, all of you. There's something under the..." That was as far as she got before one of Vito's guards grabbed her by the arm. "You've had too much to drink, sweetheart," he sneered. "Go cool off in the back." "Let her talk," Vito said lazily, tapping his cigar against the ashtray. The guard hesitated, then let go. Amara's arm ached, but she didn't stop. "I heard it. It's under the floor. A bomb or something. Please, sir, you have to trust me." Vito's smirk didn't move. "Do I look like a man who runs from shadows?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Do you want to die?" For the first time, his smile faltered, just for a second. But pride is louder than reason. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling smoke. "Tell you what," he said, "if I die tonight, you can keep the restaurant." The table erupted in cruel laughter again. Amara's chest burned with frustration. She wanted to shake him, to make him see what she saw, the fear in the kitchen, the ticking that hadn't stopped. But his arrogance was iron. No words could pierce it. So she did the only thing she could. She turned and ran. She burst into the kitchen, shouting for everyone to get out. Malik didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand, and together they pushed through the back door, stumbling into the cold night air. The alley smelled of smoke and rain. They kept running until the restaurant was a blur of light behind them. Then came the silence, the long, heavy silence that always comes before the end. The explosion ripped through the night like the sound of God's fury. The ground shook beneath them. Fire bloomed through the windows, a roar swallowing laughter and music in one breath. Amara fell to her knees, the shock waves slamming into her chest. Malik pulled her up, but she couldn't look away. The place that had taken so much from her, her time, her peace, her dignity, was now nothing but flames. Fire trucks screamed in the distance. People ran into the street, shouting, crying. Amara stood there, trembling, her face streaked with tears and soot. "I tried to warn them," she whispered. "I tried." When the smoke finally cleared, only rubble remained. The news called it an accident. The city called it a tragedy, but those who knew whispered otherwise. They said someone had tried to take Vito's empire down that night and had almost succeeded. And somewhere in that ruin, amid the ashes and twisted gold, Amara felt something change. Not relief, not joy, just a strange, quiet strength. She had seen what happens when power refuses to listen. She had seen the cost of arrogance, and she had survived. In a world where her voice had always been too small, too soft, too easily dismissed, that night proved it carried weight. The kind of weight that could have saved lives if only someone had heard it. And as dawn crept over the city, washing the smoke-stained sky with light, one truth echoed in her mind, a warning to everyone who thought they were untouchable. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that could save your life, if only you listened. The smoke from Vito's cigar curled through the air like a living thing, thick, heavy, poisonous. It drifted past Amara's face, stinging her eyes, choking her breath, swallowing her warning whole. "Sir, please," she had said, but her words had vanished somewhere between the jazz and the laughter. The clock on the wall kept ticking, too loud, too steady, like it was mocking her. Every second that passed sounded like it carried a heartbeat, a warning she couldn't silence. Tick, tick, tick. She moved through the restaurant, her steps quick, her whispers trembling. "We need to leave," she told one of the waiters by the bar, her voice low, urgent. The man looked at her like she'd gone mad. "Are you crazy?" he muttered, stacking glasses. "You want to lose your job?" Another server shook her head, fear etched across her face. "Amara, you know who's sitting in that room. You don't mess with people like that." People like that, that's what everyone said. Vito Morley and his men weren't just rich, they were untouchable. The kind of men who believed the city owed them silence. Amara had seen that silence too many times, in the way people bowed when they walked by, in the way fear replaced truth. But tonight, silence would kill them. She could feel it deep in her bones. At the head of the table, Vito laughed, the sound deep and sharp, like glass breaking. He raised his glass, whiskey swirling golden under the chandelier. "To loyalty," he said. The room echoed with voices, "to loyalty," and the clinking of glasses filled the air. But Amara couldn't breathe. Each toast sounded like a countdown. Each laugh was a drumbeat marching toward disaster. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her chest felt tight. She kept glancing toward the kitchen door where she'd first heard the ticking. She could almost hear it now under the noise, faint but insistent, like something mechanical, something waiting. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning the floor, the shadows beneath the tables. That's when she saw it. A black duffel bag, half hidden beneath a chair leg. The zipper slightly open, a faint red light pulsing inside like a heartbeat. Her lips parted, her eyes widened. The world seemed to stop moving. For a moment, the sound of laughter faded, and all she could hear was her own breathing. She stepped closer, her voice trembling, barely more than a whisper. "Mr. Morley, please." "Enough." The word hit her like a gunshot. Vito's voice cut through the room, cold and sharp. Every head turned toward her. He glared at her through the haze of cigar smoke, his jaw tightening. Do your job and stay out of men's business." The room went silent. Amara froze. The humiliation hit her first, the sting of being silenced in front of everyone. Then came the anger, the helplessness. Her hands trembled around the tray she held. She wanted to scream that this wasn't about business, that this was about life and death, but his eyes warned her not to. That same look, the one she'd seen 100 times before from men who thought they owned the world, it told her she was nothing. Just a waitress, just another face meant to serve, not speak. Her throat burned as she turned away, tears threatening to spill. The other waiters avoided her eyes. The music played on, forced and hollow. Outside, thunder rolled through the sky, a deep growl that rattled the windows. Rain started to fall, soft at first, then heavier, like the heavens themselves were warning them to run. But inside, no one moved. Amara walked to the edge of the room, every nerve in her body screaming. She could still see the bag. The red light blinked again, slower now, then faster, her breath caught. "God," she whispered, "please, someone listen." But no one did. The men at the table were too busy drinking, their laughter too loud. Power made them blind, made them deaf. Vito leaned back in his chair, puffing on his cigar, telling stories about loyalty and respect, about the men he'd buried for less. The others nodded, pretending to understand honor while ignoring humanity. Amara's mind raced. She thought about her mother back home, about the bills stacked on the kitchen counter, about how losing this job would mean no rent, no food. Fear pulled her in two directions, one toward survival, one toward conscience. She could walk away, pretend she didn't see it, or she could try one last time. The clock ticked again, louder. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but stronger this time. "Sir," she said, her words cutting through the noise, "please, I'm begging you, there's something under." Before she could finish, one of Vito's guards stood up. His chair screeched against the floor, the sound slicing through the air. "You deaf girl," he snarled. The boss said enough. Amara flinched. The entire restaurant watched now, the air heavy with tension. Vito didn't even look at her. He took another slow puff of his cigar, exhaling smoke like boredom. "Take her to the back," he said quietly. "She's disturbing my meal." Her heart stopped. The guard reached for her arm, but she stepped back. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. "You don't understand. There's a bomb." The guard laughed. "You think we scare that easy?" But her words didn't come from fear anymore. They came from truth. "You should." The guard froze for half a second, long enough for doubt to flicker in his eyes. But Vito's voice killed it instantly. "Get her out," he ordered. Tears blurred Amara's vision as the man dragged her toward the kitchen. She twisted, trying to free herself, her voice breaking. "You're all going to die. Please, just look under the table." The door slammed shut behind her. Inside, the laughter started again. The men raised their glasses one last time, toasting to loyalty, to power, to everything they thought would never end. In the kitchen, Amara stumbled forward, gasping for air. Malik ran to her, grabbing her shoulders. "What happened?" he asked. "They wouldn't listen," she whispered. "They wouldn't." And then it happened. A faint pop, like air being sucked from the room, then silence, then the earth split open. The explosion ripped through the restaurant, shattering glass, throwing fire into the sky. The walls groaned and collapsed, sending waves of heat and smoke pouring into the street. Amara fell to the floor, the shockwave rattling through her bones. Malik pulled her up, dragging her toward the back door. They stumbled into the alley, coughing, their faces lit by the orange glow behind them. Rain poured down, hissing against the fire. Sirens screamed in the distance. Amara turned, eyes wide, watching as the place she had served night after night burned to the ground. The same men who had laughed at her were now gone, their loyalty buried under the same arrogance that had blinded them. Her body trembled, her heart felt hollow. "I tried," she whispered, "I tried to tell them." And somewhere deep inside that wreckage, the clock, that no one had listened to finally stopped ticking. 5, 4, 3. And then there was nothing. Only silence, the kind that comes after the warning no one heard. The blast ripped through the city like a scream that could split the heavens. One moment, La Vostra Cucina was a temple of power, crystal chandeliers glittering like stars, laughter spilling like wine, and the next, it was hell itself. Fire burst through the floor, swallowing everything in light. The sound was so loud it didn't even sound like sound anymore, just a pressure, a roar, a wave of heat that stole the air from every lung. Glass exploded into dust. The chandeliers crashed to the ground, raining diamonds of death. Tables flipped, bodies flew, and the music died mid-note. The taste of smoke filled every breath. Amara didn't think, she just moved. One second she was standing near the bar, her tray falling from her hands, and the next she was diving toward the door. The world turned orange, then white. The shock wave hit her like a fist, throwing her across the floor. Her ears rang, her eyes burned. The air itself felt heavy. She couldn't hear the screams anymore, only the silence that comes after everything breaks. When she opened her eyes, she was lying near the doorway, half buried under a beam. The room was unrecognizable, walls torn apart, tables splintered, fire crawling up velvet curtains like living snakes. The chandeliers were shattered jewels on the ground, flames licked at the paintings. Smoke poured through the cracks in the ceiling. Somewhere deep inside, someone was still screaming. She tried to move, but pain exploded through her shoulder. Her body ached like it had been torn apart. Blood trickled from her hairline. She coughed, the taste of ash filling her mouth. She tried to focus, but the world kept spinning. Her eyes searched through the wreckage, through the blur of fire and glass, and that's when she saw him. Vito Morley, the man who thought nothing could touch him. He stood in the middle of it all, frozen like a statue made of smoke and pride. His suit was torn, his face streaked with blood, his hands trembling. Around him, the men who used to laugh were gone, some buried under tables, some lost to the flames. His empire, his loyalty, his arrogance, all of it burned in front of him. The fire reflected in his eyes like a mirror showing him everything he'd built his life on and everything he'd just lost. He stumbled forward, his shoes crunching over glass and bone. "Tony," he called, his voice breaking. "Mick," no answer, just the crackle of fire. He looked around, desperate, helpless. The smoke swirled around him like ghosts. For the first time in his life, Vito Morley looked small. And then he saw her. Amara was crawling toward the light coming from the broken wall, coughing, her body shaking. Her hands were covered in soot, her apron torn. She wasn't trying to save herself. She was reaching toward the sound of a voice, his. Vito stumbled through the wreckage until he was beside her. He dropped to his knees, the weight of everything collapsing inside him. "You," his voice caught. He could barely speak. "You knew." Amara looked up at him, her eyes weak but steady. Her lips were cracked. Smoke clung to her hair. "I told you," she whispered, her voice barely there, "but you didn't want to hear a waitress." The words hit harder than the explosion itself. Vito stared at her, guilt rising like the smoke around them. His hands shook as he tried to help her sit up. "I didn't," he started, but his voice broke apart. "I didn't believe." "You never do," she said softly, her eyes closing for a moment. "Men like you never listen until it's too late." Outside, rain began to fall, soft, almost merciful. The fire hissed where the drops met the heat. The world slowed down. The sirens were coming now, distant but growing louder, echoing through the wet night. Vito looked around at the destruction. The tables where he'd toasted to loyalty were gone. The men who'd sworn to protect him were nothing but shadows in the smoke. The restaurant, his pride, his fortress, gone in a single breath. All that remained was this woman, this waitress he'd dismissed, sitting beside him in the ruins. He reached out, his voice trembling. "Why didn't you run?" Amara coughed again, her eyes glassy but fierce. "Because even if no one listens, somebody has to try." The simplicity of it broke him. He lowered his head, pressing a hand against his face. I should have listened, he muttered. God, I should have listened. She gave a weak, bitter laugh. You had a choice, you all did. The firelight danced over them, painting their faces in gold and red. Around them, the night smelled of smoke, rain, and regret. Every breath was thick, with the truth neither of them could escape, that arrogance had a price, and they had both just paid it. Vito tried to stand, but his knees gave out. He looked around one more time, as if still expecting to see his men come laughing out of the smoke. But there was nothing, only ashes, only silence. He turned back to Amara, his voice quiet, broken. You saved my life. She shook her head slowly. No, she said, I tried to save everyone's. Her eyes met his, and for the first time he couldn't hold her gaze. Power meant nothing now. Titles, money, fear, all of it burned away with the fire. What remained was just two people, one who had all the power in the world and never used it right, and one who had none but still found the courage to speak. A firefighter's voice echoed from outside, shouting orders. The sound of footsteps and shattering glass filled the air as rescue crews broke through the debris. Vito called out for help, his voice hoarse. The men pulled Amara out first, laying her gently on a stretcher. She turned her head toward him one last time, her voice barely above the rain. Maybe next time, she whispered. Listen before it's too late. Vito's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words died behind his teeth. As they carried her away, he looked down at his trembling hands, blackened with soot. The same hands that once signed deals, paid off judges, silenced anyone who dared to speak. Hands that built empires on fear. Now they couldn't even hold a single truth. He stood alone as the firefighters rushed past him. The rain came harder, washing the soot from his face, but not the guilt. The city around him moved on, horns, sirens, voices, but inside him, something stayed frozen. That night, Vito Morley lost more than his restaurant. He lost his power, his pride, and the illusion that men like him could control everything. Because the truth had always been simple. No one controls the moment when truth demands to be heard. And somewhere, beneath the roar of the rain, the whisper of a waitress still echoed, soft, steady, unbreakable. I told you, but you didn't want to hear. Some lessons he would learn are taught by fire, others by the people you thought didn't matter. The city had never seen so much smoke, not just from the explosion that tore through the east side, but from the whispers that followed. Mafia boss survives explosion saved by waitress, the headlines screamed. The world read it, clicked it, forgot it. But behind the flashing cameras and the glossy news stories was a truth that no one saw, a truth buried beneath bandages, broken bones, and a silence so heavy it could crush the soul. Inside a small, white hospital room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and wilted lilies, Vito Morley sat alone. The same man whose name once made the streets tremble now sat hunched over, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hands shaking like paper in the wind. Machines hummed softly beside him, keeping rhythm with the fragile breaths of the young woman lying still on the bed, Amara, the waitress who had dragged him from the fire. Her skin was pale against the white sheets, her hair tangled and burned at the ends. A patch of ash still clung to her wrist, like the city itself had marked her for something bigger than survival. Vito's eyes were red, not from the smoke, but from something deeper, regret, the kind that doesn't wash off with water. He had spent a lifetime commanding men with guns, demanding loyalty, punishing weakness. Yet here he was, powerless. The hands that once signed death orders now trembled as they held hers, the hands of a girl he'd barely noticed before the world turned upside down. He leaned forward, his voice low, cracked, honest in a way it had never been before. I never listened to people who didn't look like me, he said. The words felt strange in his mouth, like he was learning a new language built out of truth. Now I understand why I should have. The room was still. A bird outside the window sang once and flew away, as if even it knew not to interrupt what was happening inside. Amara's eyelids fluttered, her lips dry and trembling. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. yet it cut through the air like glass. "It's not about race," she said. "It's about respect. Every voice matters, even the quiet ones." Her words didn't sound like a sermon. They sounded like life itself, raw, tired, true. Vito felt something collapse inside him, not his heart, but the armor he had worn for decades, the armor of money, of fear, of power built on silence. He looked at her for a long time, trying to memorize her face, the same face that had defied his orders, that had stood up when everyone else bowed down. He thought of the night she pulled him out of the fire, her arms trembling, her eyes wide, refusing to leave him behind even when she could have saved herself. He thought of all the names, all the voices, all the people he had ignored. For the first time in his life, he bowed his head, not in defeat, but in humility, the kind that doesn't need applause. Days turned into weeks. Amara healed slowly, her body bearing scars that told stories of courage no one could print. Reporters came and went, their microphones hungry for a quote, their cameras greedy for a smile. But she didn't speak to them. She didn't need to. The truth wasn't theirs to sell. Vito visited every day. No guards, no entourage, no gold watch glinting under hospital lights. Just him, a man stripped down to his soul. He brought flowers once, but Amara had smiled and said, "Keep them, they die too fast." So instead he brought silence, the kind of silence that listens. One morning, when the sun spilled across her bed like a quiet blessing, she said, "You don't owe me anything." Vito shook his head. "I owe you everything." She smiled faintly, her eyes soft. "Then use it, don't waste it." He didn't understand at first, but he would. A month later, the city woke to another headline, quieter this time. Vito Morley leaves the mafia, funds scholarship for young women. The story didn't trend long, the world moved on. But somewhere in the South Side, in a small community college that had been forgotten by everyone except the people who lived there, a new scholarship opened. It was called the Amara Grant. It was for girls who had been told to stay in their place. For the ones whose voices were small, but whose dreams were loud. Vito showed up on the first day of the award ceremony. He didn't speak. He just sat in the back, listening as a young black girl, nervous, determined, took the stage and said, "I want to be a lawyer. I want to fight for people who can't fight for themselves." Her voice shook, but Vito felt it deep, the kind of tremor that moves something ancient inside you. When the applause came, he didn't clap right away. He just closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him like absolution. Later that night, he drove past the ruins of the restaurant, the place where everything had burned. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, though months had passed. He parked the car and stood there for a long time, staring at the ashes that had once been marble and glass. The streetlights flickered against the blackened walls, painting ghosts of the past across the pavement. He whispered her name once, not as a prayer, not as a plea, but as gratitude. And then, quietly, he said to the darkness, "I hear you now." In that moment, something shifted in the city itself. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe it was the way guilt finally learned to breathe. The next morning, a janitor sweeping the sidewalk outside the ruins found a single white rose sitting on the ground, its stem burned, its petals still perfect. No one knew who left it there, but those who saw it said it looked like peace. And somewhere, beyond the noise of sirens and ambition, beyond the gossip of men who still thought power made them untouchable, a truth began to echo, soft, steady, unstoppable. Ignoring the humble can burn down empires. Listening can rebuild souls. The city didn't forget the fire, it never would. But from its ashes, something else began to grow, not fear, not silence, but understanding. A waitress had taught a man with an empire how to kneel. A man with blood on his hands had learned how to wash them clean, not with water, but with change. And if you listened closely, really listened, you could almost hear it in the streets at night. The quiet voices, the ones no one used to hear, finally being heard.